Cool. All right, well, the numbers are still going up, but let's get started because we got some interesting stuff to get to today. So welcome. Thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Zach Snyder. I'm a program manager at the nonprofit Solar Oregon, and we are super thrilled to have you here for our second webinar of the virtual portion of the Go Zero Tour 2021, which is a statewide zero energy and going zero homes tour that we do annually, and it's our biggest event of the year. We took a look at the first 5 sites of the tour on Tuesday. You can find that recording, and we'll be sending that out again after this webinar with the recording of this webinar. And today we're going to be looking at our 4 sites that are part of the in-person tour this Saturday on the 16th, which is a separate registration. So we'll drop that link in the chat in just a second. But here's just a little overview of what we're going to take a look at today. I'm going to kick things off with a little bit of an introduction and overview of Solar Oregon and the basics of zero energy. And then we're going to dive in and look at these 4 sites. Super great to have everybody, the site hosts, joining us today. At each site, we are going to watch a 2-minute video on the site that we filmed, and then we'll have 8 minutes for a Q&A also. And that's really the point of this webinar. So we want to give you access as our audience to be able to ask questions and really hear the stories of these sites. We have a diversity of sites. And so make sure that you have your eye on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you know where that Q&A box is, and just think about what questions you want to ask. So a little bit about Solar Oregon. Like I said, my name is Zach. I'm a program manager, and this is my co-lead Ari, who's also on the line. We're a 40-year-old nonprofit, and we educate about solar and other forms of clean energy. We educate about energy efficiency and electric vehicles and batteries. And we do that through workshops for home and business owners, solar tours, and tours like the Go Zero Tour. We also have hosted and actually helped to develop the original Solarize campaign, which allows communities to go solar together. And we're all about increasing access to solar and helping people to get the information they need to adopt clean energy. So we are a member-based nonprofit. So thank you so much to anybody who's on the line who is a Solar Oregon member. And if you're not, you can go to our website and become a member. You can also donate. Any donation you give really helps support the work and the programming that we put on. So thank you so much. We'll also drop that link in the chat, and we have a pretty active social media presence. So make sure to follow us at Solar Oregon at Solar Oregon. This event is part of a really awesome week of events called Sustainable Building Week that feature content about all aspects of green building and green energy on buildings. It's really exciting. There are a lot of things going on, and you can see that there are a ton of sponsors and collaborating organizations. Here is a quick look at the schedule. So obviously we're on Thursday, but there's still plenty of great events. These orange boxes are just highlighting the components of this tour. So as I mentioned, this is the second virtual webinar. First one was on Tuesday. And we're really excited for Saturday's in-person open house tour, which has 4 sites in Portland that we're going to take a look at today, as well as one in Bend and Ashland each. And those are ticketed separately. So if you happen to be in those communities or you know someone in those communities, tell them to check it out and go check out a zero energy site. So This tour is, like I said, it's the biggest event we do. It's also evolved in really interesting ways over the past few years. In 2019, we had 12 homes all within the Portland metro area. Last year, because of COVID, we did it all virtually and we made it a statewide tour. This year, we're really excited to have both a virtual and in-person portion statewide. And we really have an amazing diversity of projects this year, from single family, new constructed home to retrofit homes. So people who have even old 1928 homes that decided to retrofit their home to be zero energy. We have an off-grid tiny home, and we even have multifamily sites this year. And it's just been really great so far to hear the stories of how these projects came to be and where the inspiration came from. This link that you see, that you can't click on the screen, but we'll put it in the chat, is to the virtual tour website. You'll see videos on there, narratives, and just technical information that will help you to learn about all these sites. If you haven't checked it out yet, I really, really encourage you to get on there right now. Just make sure it's in your browser. And you can watch all this content, and it'll be up for a long time. So the ones that are not grayed out are the ones we're going to take a look at today, and it'll be pretty great. So a huge thank you to our sponsors who really make this event possible. A huge thank you to Energy Trust of Oregon, our title sponsor. They give us a ton of support for this event as well as for other events. And I'll talk a little bit about Energy Trust in a second. But also a big thank you to Beneficial State Bank, who's actually Solar Oregon's bank now. They're a registered B Corp, and they just do great work in Oregon. So Energy Trust of Oregon, our title sponsor, they're an independent nonprofit. They have a ton of programs that encourage and incentivize the adoption of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And I'm going to link to some of those resources in just a second. But thank you to Energy Trust of Oregon. So before we get to the sites, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what is zero energy. What is it? What do we really mean by that? And zero energy, in the simplest way you can put it, is that your production of energy matches your consumption over the course of a year. And so typically this is with solar. But it's not just solar, it's also energy efficiency, which is really the key and really unlocks the potential of solar. And zero energy is a design paradigm that is super exciting, as you've probably picked up, not just in new buildings, but also as a way to retrofit old buildings. So here are a couple of links. You know, this tour is a great place to get ideas, but if you want to start to implement things and learn how to implement things and find incentives to help you do that for your own home or business, we'll drop these links in the chat. You can learn about efficiency from energytrust.org/residential. And there are a ton of resources there, from how to get LEDs to heat pump water heaters and heat pumps, all sorts of things. If you want to learn about solar, energytrust.org/programs/solar is a place where you can learn about incentives and also find the Energy Trust Solar Bid Tool. And you can really easily fill out, just takes a minute, fill out a form, and get connected with 3 really highly rated contractors in your area. And we highly suggest using that tool. Finally, if you are a builder and joining us, maybe as part of Sustainable Building Week, Energy Trust also has great resources for you to learn how to incorporate zero energy design into the work that you do. You can go to energytrust.org/residential/new-homes-solutions. And without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started and take a look at the awesome sites we have today. As I mentioned, we are going to watch a 2-minute video that we shot at each site, and then there will be a Q&A. So discover that Q&A button, and any question you have is really not too small. Just go ahead and put it in the Q&A box. So first, we're going to take a look at Going Street Commons, which is a really exciting project by Green Hammer. And Stefan Aguier is here to talk with us about that, and I'll introduce him in just a second.
I think just in general, there's an untapped market for zero energy homes. I think a lot of people recognize right now in particular that their carbon footprint really matters. From a marketing perspective, you can talk about health, you can talk about comfort, certainly durability. My name is Stefan Aguier and I own Green Hammer Design Build. And we were the builders of this 11 home community. And so this is my zero energy ready home. As a firm, we've been really focusing on resiliency, but in particular around, that nexus between human health and planet health, and how, the built environment can work in harmony with the natural world and how often it just doesn't. In the industry, we talk a lot about, first you have to have your conservation veggies before you have your solar dessert. It's true, but the veggies are also really good for you. They feel good. And so the veggies here are like super insulated envelope, airtight enclosure, really, advanced triple pane tilt turn windows. It's not unique in zero energy design or construction. It's really become the norm. We primarily get our energy savings through the building envelope. In this case, it's cellulose insulated 2x6 walls with a couple inches of exterior fiberboard, basically an all wood assembly, which is very low carbon. All of these homes have a particularly innovative system that's a combination heat pump with heat recovery ventilation. We haven't put the solar on yet. We expect we'll need just about 7 kilowatts. We're Earth Advantage Zero Energy ready. And so Energy Trust provide a series of cash incentives there. So there's, I think, approximately up to like $4,600 worth of incentives for each home. As a father and a business leader, seeing what I've seen and thinking about the future in the way that you do as a parent, it's scary. We're setting examples for a lot of people, and we're setting examples for our community. We have to keep a strict focus on environmental and social justice in everything that we do. And I'd like to see, solar and zero energy buildings becoming much more accessible than they traditionally have been. And I'm very passionate about doing what we have to do to make that happen as we move forward.
All right, super exciting, very beautiful site. Super excited to have Stefan Aguier here. Stefan, I'm gonna stop sharing here, and I'm gonna kick the questions off. Remember that to think of questions that you want to ask, put them in the Q&A box, and I'll queue those up in a minute. But Stefan, I want to kick it off talking about this site, and it's zero energy ready, and that is a way that you can build that's different from zero energy. I wonder if you could just kind of walk through what it is and really what the value is and why that's the right way to build sometimes.
Sure. I think it's the right way to build all the time is my opinion, but the concept of zero energy first and foremost is that you produce as much renewable energy on site as you consume across a year. Zero energy ready means that you have a designated area on site or typically on the roof of a home for solar energy, and there's enough space that it's typically solar is the renewable energy you're going to be producing. There's enough space on that roof to produce enough renewable energy to offset the energy needed for that home. The reason I like zero energy ready is that not all homes have the best solar access. The incentives aren't fully there depending on trees and adjacent buildings and that kind of a thing. That's actually absolutely the case here at Going Street Commons. And what you need to do in general to make something zero energy ready is really drive down the energy load in the building. And you focus on that first. So I think, in the video I said you have to have your conservation veggies first before your solar dessert. And so it's really that. It's making sure that you have these buildings that are efficient enough. A lot of the standard homes, like an average home out in the market, just doesn't have enough roof area, period, to offset its energy with solar energy. So, and oftentimes even the entire building site, if it were covered in solar, wouldn't be enough. So first, being really conservative with the building enclosure, making super insulated, airtight building enclosure really drives down those energy loads. Typically, you can get 70% overall energy savings just by focusing on building enclosure, and then things like the appliances and lights, the plug loads and that sort of thing next. But yeah, I love the fact that it makes you focus on your building enclosure and mechanicals before you really focused on solar energy.
That's great. And just a follow-up question to that. You're mentioning that most buildings don't have the adequate roof area, and why is that exactly? Like, what makes, like, what how does that kind of factor into the design of how you look at the roof area? And is it easy to do that if you try as a builder to design a home to have the right roof area?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of things that go into this, right? So one is the access to solar. The other, of course, is just, the building is energy efficient enough so that providing roof area is feasible to offset all of your energy. And so that's kind of that big first question. And, if you really focus on the building enclosure, then that's something that's permanent and built in to the whole grid system, right? So you're going to sip less energy no matter what in the long term. The standard home may not orient the roof such that south access is feasible, but also even site can be complicated depending on what's going on with trees and neighboring buildings, and then also just the overall aesthetic you're going for. If you plan for it up front, it's a tremendously easier than if you're trying to retrofit in a solar system on a home that was never really oriented to kind of benefit the most from solar. And if you make a really conservative building envelope, then it matters a lot less that you have perfect south solar access. You can get enough just off of your kind of little east or west facing slopes. But understanding all this stuff up front is critical. When we're doing zero energy ready or zero energy, we're often working with a partner like Earth Advantage, who does all of those calculations for us. We often will do our own calculations on the side, and just it's all, we like to check the math and see if there's any opportunities there. But the beauty is that for anyone out there is that you can get a pretty inexpensive certification, in the sense that $1,600, relatively speaking, that's not a huge cost for most, relative to most certifications. And the back end, you can get up to $4,600, $5,000 worth of incentives to help cover those costs. And in the meantime, you've got someone kind of walking you all the way through that whole process, and doing everything from the upfront energy model of the design to kind of coming in and commissioning the building envelope, so airtightness tests, and checking in construction and then post construction, as well as with Earth Advantage, to get to zero energy ready, you have to meet their platinum standard, which is their kind of holistic 5-tier green building standard, which incorporates things like health and air quality, materials, water, site, just beyond the energy side. And so you just come up with a better product and healthier home in general. So I think it's really great from a lot of different angles.
That's great. And we've got a few questions here now. So Nancy asks, are there environmental benefits to having 2 stories beyond small footprint and more density? Do 2 stories save heat, keep cool, and are there energy reduction benefits to sharing walls?
Yeah, great question. Yes. I mean, it's all, construction, like any, it's a bit of a math equation, similar with energy modeling. You're always looking at surface area to volume. ratio. So if you have a box, or the perfect thing would be a sphere, you'd have less surface area to leak your energy out of and more volume to contain it. And so a single story tends to spread that out, and so you have more surface area and less volume. Two stories tend to be more cubic and actually are really good in the sense of that, low surface area to high volume ratio. And absolutely multifamily, shared wall systems, that's one less side. So now you've got, two stories and a shared wall. You're reducing the amount of potential exposure to the elements. And so that reduces your temperature change between the interior of the home and the exterior is considerably reduced, right? When you've got a home next to you. And so, yeah, both are huge advantages. And so that's why, a very large affordable, housing project that's going to be 5 stories, they're with multiple units, you're going to see these big boxes. The math is much better. There's less surface area to volume. So from a construction cost standpoint, the cost will be much reduced, but also from an energy efficiency standpoint, the buildings by nature are going to be much, much more efficient because there's less area exposed to the elements. But yeah, we're always looking at that in this industry. So great question.
That's great. Anonymous user asked, what is the units per acre density and the selling price for the homes?
So on this site, we're on about just a little over an acre, and I haven't, done the units per density, unit density, but you've got 11 homes across an acre. So almost like a standard lot in the city of Portland, about 1/10 of an acre per home, kind of on the average density, but much larger kind of green space and commons area. And yeah, the zoning was such that now I'm sure we could get a lot more units on a site like this, probably closer to double with the new RIP and also, House Bill 548 and some other changes to the code. But this predated all of that.
Cool. And Edward,
Selling price. Sorry, that ranged from about 675 to 750. They're 2,000 square foot homes. Sorry.
cool. And Edward asked, did the zoning and land or building ownership model save money to allow more energy efficiency features?
I think when you have 11 homes, it does help from a cost standpoint overall. There weren't a whole lot of, otherwise I wouldn't say there were a lot of cost incentives. You still have similar SDC fees and permitting fees. There was some advantage in how the water is shared here from a cost standpoint, but it's also a longer term HOA management cost too. It's a lot of shared meters. And so there's a shared kind of main meter. So there was some cost savings on that. I'd have to extract out what that looked like. But there were some areas where we're able to cut some costs, but it is a condo and homeowners association. And so that does actually bring back a lot of those costs as dues. The upside is that, you should be able to keep those dues to help maintain the site and the homes in the long term. So, as a single family homeowner on a single residential lot, you might not have that account you're putting aside money in, but you should. So here we're just regulated to make sure that happens.
Gotcha. And then one last quick question. You talked about roof area and roof design as part of Zero Energy Ready. Someone asked, what is required for solar ready design, and what are the other aspects there?
So solar ready, you just need to show that we have about a 7 kilowatt load for this home, and we need to show that we have roof area that we can put enough solar on to offset our energy. Now we have a pretty shaded roof area to do that. And so we need a larger solar array, closer to 10 kilowatt solar array to offset the energy, provided the amount of shading that we have. We had to show that in design. So I'd have someone come out and do a total solar, roof factor. So how much of the year do we have the exposure? We had to have Earth Advantage run the energy model and say, well, this is your loads, somewhere in that 7 to 7.5 kilowatt range. And so you need, X amount of solar given the amount of shading you have. And let's see if we can find that on a roof. And for my particular home, we actually have a carport section of the carport roof that has the best solar factor. And so that's where the solar is actually allocated for this home and a couple of the other homes. And some of the other ones have much better solar access. But that's the type of stuff that you need to know.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stefan. Beautiful site. I'm super excited to go check this out on Saturday. And yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to our next site here. Is this full screen for everybody? Cool. All right. The next site we've got is Edward Louie. And this is the first time we've had an off-grid site. And I believe the first time we've had a tiny home. This is an off-grid tiny home. And it's in the final kind of stretches of construction. And I'm super excited to ask Edward about it. So let's take a look at this video.
The inspiration for this project is to try to test out as many high-performance building products and technologies as possible in an affordable way. And so by going tiny, you can then spend the money you would on square footage and put it into high-performance materials and technologies. My name is Edward Louie, and I'm the owner, the builder, the designer. I wear many hats with this project. This is a DIY project. It took almost a year of on and off design. And then in February of 2020, this trailer arrived, and then the real construction started happening. We think about energy efficiency at every point along the process. Like, this is a heat pump water heater. Cooking will be done with an induction cooktop. Lights are also all DC lights. The floor has probably 8 inches of polyiso, so that's R60 in the floors. The walls are made out of a DIY recip panel. So that's about like R23, 25 continuous. The roof is also a SIP panel that has about like an R45 continuous. Imported triple pane windows from Poland. U values are around 0.18 to 0.2. The solar has been installed for about like 2 or 3 weeks, and then the battery's been installed for about 1.5 weeks. And so everything's still getting dialed in and commissioned and tested. And so far it's been working really good. Not having any utility bills, and then also being a off-grid tiny house on wheels, I'm not having to disconnect from any utility in order to move it. But at the same time, being all electric, I'm not having to even go to a gas station to get propane, and then also have any of the dangers associated with having tanks of propane around and burning propane in a small space. I think really we have one generation to turn this ship around that we call Earth. And so I'm going to do everything I can to reduce my carbon footprint by building a small scale home, living in a small scale home, and then having it be carbon free and completely on renewable energy.
All right. So I'm super excited to introduce Edward Louie. And if you already are thinking of questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. Edward, this is it's so interesting. It's so great to see. I'm curious, how unique is an off-grid zero energy tiny home? And why is it hard to build zero energy at this scale?
Absolutely. I think there's probably about 5 off-grid all-electric tiny homes And in terms of net zero and from an electric accounting perspective, there's plenty of so-called off-grid tiny homes, but they have propane heat and propane stoves. So I mean, at that point, you wonder how much of their actual annual energy use is actually coming from electricity. And then if it's very little, then it's not that difficult to power all those small electric loads with solar. But on this home, the unique feature is that all the big energy drawing features like cooking and water heating and space heating, those are all electric. And so then you have to have a much bigger solar system, and you have to manage your electricity a lot better. So a number of all electric tiny homes that are off grid is and near zero energy is probably 5 or less in the world that I know of. And then what was the other half of the question?
And so like why though is it then like so rare? Like what makes it so difficult to do?
Yeah, absolutely. You're extremely limited on the amount of roof area you have. So if you, I'll switch my camera around. So I don't have enough roof area, so I extended the roof through an awning to be able to add some more panels through an awning. So then now I have enough panels to be able to stay off grid even in the wintertime. And so the roof area is a big factor. And then the other big factor is that even no matter whether you have 5,000 square foot of housing and versus 150 square foot of housing, you generally still use this relatively the same amount of water for each shower. You use relatively about the same amount of energy for cooking and stuff. And so those big energy loads that don't change regardless of square footage, you still have to meet. So that makes it very difficult.
That's great. And so what is your kind of like overall goal? You mentioned that you wanted to use the most efficient technologies, and are you kind of like hoping to show this and kind of use as an educational piece?
Absolutely, yeah. So being a tiny house on wheels, it can be towable to university campuses, trade shows, to be able to spread the information about these types of technologies. Like in the video, I mentioned like DC 12-volt lights. That's not very common. There are emerging standards to make that more accessible and common in full-scale homes. That's still in the works. But if you think about it, LED lights are DC based. So inside every single LED light bulb is a little microchip to be able to step down the voltage and and convert that AC electricity over to DC. And so that's in every single light bulb. Why do you need to lose efficiency in that power conversion every single light bulb? Like, why not just have a home that has DC circuits available for appliances and lighting that really should not be necessary to be on AC anyways?
That's great. And one feature that I thought was really interesting when I was there and you were giving me the tour was that you have a pretty large water heater, right? And you did that on purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. So even for a tiny house designed for one person, there's a 50-gallon storage water heater. And the reason for that is that I'm treating and using the heat pump water heater as a battery. And so when there's an excess supply of solar energy, I want to program it so that it'll increase its temperature set point, like perhaps all the way up as much as like 140 degrees to charge up as much as the storage tank can hold in terms of thermal energy. And then on the cloudy days, then that the thermal energy battery can give me 3 or 4 days worth of showers and hot water to wash dishes and stuff like that.
That's great. And so we've got a couple of questions here about the solar and the batteries. What size is your PV system and what's the square footage of your home?
Yeah, so The size of the PV is, I believe, around like 3.6 or 3.7 kilowatts. And then the battery is, the house battery is 4.8 kilowatt hour of lithium iron phosphate storage. And then I also have a plug-in Prius that I have done some custom wiring for so that I can draw off of the 8 kilowatt hour battery in the plug-in Prius. Yeah, I'm not allowed to tell people exactly the details how to do that because the person who instructed me asked me to sign some papers. And then in terms of square footage, the exterior, if you measure exterior dimensions, is 187 square feet. If you measure interior dimensions, it's about 150.
That's great. And so you're talking about your water heater being essentially like a 3-day hot water battery on those cloudy days. I'm curious how normally, quote unquote, right? Because it kind of depends on your lifestyle, but how normally will you be able to use electricity in this home? How did you size the solar and the battery? Is it like you have to live a very constrained lifestyle?
Yeah, not really. There's more than enough energy to go around. I haven't moved into it yet, so I can't prove it yet. So it's something that I certainly wanted. That's why I'm building it, so that I can also test whether like the precision of energy models versus like reality. I have some suspects that energy models don't actually model that well when you get to these small square footages. And so, and I don't know of any energy models that account for like DC lighting efficiency advantages or 12 volts, RV fridge, efficiency advantages and stuff. So I think that if I can get pretty darn close to net zero or there with the traditional energy modeling packages, then when I live in it, I will actually go below the, be exceeding those expectations and actually not be as much energy constrained as the energy models suggest.
That's great. We have one last question here in the chat. Why did you choose a home on wheels? And I think you kind of hinted at this. Do you expect to travel, and do you think it will be difficult to find a place to park your home?
I think I don't, tiny homes that are built to more of a traditional residential home, standard with really thick insulation, high quality walls, are heavier and they don't travel nearly as well as the RVs that you can buy in an RV shop. And so as a result, it's a lot more challenging to move them. I don't anticipate moving them that often. So maybe like move it once or twice a year once it's built to, some key events and stuff. But in terms of parking it, that is getting better and better each day. So Portland is extremely tiny home friendly. There's more and more people willing to develop their backyard or side lots and stuff into a tiny homes multiplex that you can park like 3 to 5 tiny homes into. And Portland also has zoning codes that allow every single home site to place a tiny home as long as it meets certain requirements. One of the primary requirements is that the tiny home can't be in front of the frontage of the house. So if you have a side lot, if the long as the front of the tiny home is behind the frontage of the house or on the backyard, then it's acceptable.
Interesting. That's great. Well, it's such an awesome site. Super excited to take a look at it on Saturday. Thanks so much, Edward. And we're gonna move on to our third site. I do have a question in the chat here. That's a general question about solar. I'll just answer it quickly. Sarah asked, do you both? Oh, maybe it's towards Edward, towards both of us. Do you think climate change / smoke haze in the Northwest will have a noticeable impact on solar that we should be accounting for. And I can just speak to that generally. People do look at, for example, when we had the 2020 fire season in Oregon, that was the record-setting fire season. People definitely, have modeled how much of that impact solar resource. It definitely makes a difference, and it's something that, in terms of where that comes into accounting, there are researching institutions that kind of set the standard for how to measure solar access. And I think that's definitely part of what they take a look at. Edward, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, nothing much. I personally don't know. I have not done any modeling in that regard.
Yeah, it's a good question though. All right, thanks so much, Edward. We're going to move on to our third site today, which is Mark Farrell. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So Mark Farrell has retrofitted his home with solar plus storage, and solar and storage is such a central focus for our nonprofit and what we're educating folks about right now, because as I think people are increasingly aware, energy resilience and the ability to weather an outage is so important. So I'll introduce Mark right after we watch his video.
Solar Oregon is one of my favorite organizations. The reason I got involved with this many years ago is one of my engineer friends said, hey, we've got all the physicists, scientists, engineers, economists working on this. We have to get the populace behind solar. And he says, that's your job. And that's what I've been doing ever since 2010. I'm Mark Farrell. My wife Stephanie and I own this home in Beaverton. I've been working with A&R Solar for the last 4 years. It's a solar and storage company, and I'm the Oregon sales manager. A&R Solar started in 2007 up in Seattle, Washington. It's a B Corp. It's also an employee-owned company. I'm an employee owner, and it was created just to do solar, but it's moved into the solar and storage area very successfully. I started looking at this about a year ago, and I worked with one of our engineers to design a system. It turns out we were able to get to net zero. The home is insulated. We've done upgrades to our hot water system. Let's say that solar and storage is accessible to a lot of people. There are more incentives coming. In fact, the Oregon Department of Energy has an incentive that just got refunded. We got an incentive for the solar from the Energy Trust of Oregon. We also got the federal tax credit on the entire system, solar plus storage of 26%. We'll be able to pay the $12 a month for just the interconnection to PGE, since we'll be able to bank all of the great solar energy we're making during the summer here and get those credits used in the winter. Also, with the battery storage system, we will be confident that, when there's an outage, we'll have some power. As we all know, climate change is here, and we need to figure out how to reduce fossil fuel burning. Solar energy production has really come a long way since I started in solar back in 2010. So in my view, it's where we need to go. We need to have a more decentralized power system, and solar and storage is the way to get there.
Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. This is such a great example of, you have you're kind of looking your whole energy picture, right? And so you got to zero. You're actually net positive right now in your home. Can you talk about what that means?
In this case, so this home, 1950s, it does have gas for heating and cooking and hot water. But I was able to measure how much electricity we're using for everything else. And my wife and I have a 5-year plan to go all electric, meaning heat pump hot water heater, heat pump HVAC, induction stove, things like that. Also, we also need to do some insulation under the house. So we have a plan to get to net zero on an all electric house, not having any gas. I was able to, and because of the one thing about incentives for solar and storage is they kind of come and go. So we realized, well, there's a good incentive right now, let's do the solar that we can, with the idea of over the next 5 years, as we continue making these improvements, we'll get a better idea of the final load that we'll have. As a company, we do a lot of energy modeling in general when we talk to customers about solar and storage, because you really want to understand what their loads are all about, so you can correctly size a solar and battery system to meet their goals.
That's great. And what made you decide to get a battery? What were the factors there?
Well, I think one thing that you know, given the fact that I'm in the industry, we're seeing that battery storage is already an essential part of how to get away from fossil fuels, whether it's utility scale or individual homes. And in fact, PGE, my utility, has acknowledged that with a pilot program where they're trying to get homeowners to install batteries around their service area, so that when there's a peak event, let's say summer afternoon, people turning on the AC, instead of PGE turning on one of their gas-fired power plants at that peak time, they'll just pull energy out of these batteries, so they don't need that gas power plant. And I thought that if I make this investment now, I can be part of that, and as part of that demonstration. And in fact, they do pay me $40 a month to be part of their program. So that's a big incentive too.
That's great. And question here in the chat: how much energy will your solar plus storage system provide when the grid is down? For example, how many days, and what does that look like for you?
So that really depends on the time of year, honestly, because for most of the year, I would say about 10 months, now I'd say about 9 months out of 12, it would be unlimited, meaning as long as I manage my loads to a certain extent, when the sun goes down, I'll be able to power some things with the battery, and the battery will get to a level, probably about 15% discharge. And then when the sun comes back up, it'll start recharging again. So we make enough solar energy most of the year that it's kind of unlimited. The difficult part is December, January, February. In the winter, obviously, we're making a lot less solar energy. So I do know that shortest day of the year, December 22nd, December 21st, snow on the roof, let's say. So I'm making no solar. I've got about 3 days of autonomy, and that's with just basic things, mainly some lights, the blower for the gas-powered heat, but that's about it. So I have to be very careful. So it does vary depending on the time of year. That's why when you look at solar and storage, it's actually solar. It's kind of a triangle: solar, storage, plus load. You have to be able to understand that balance.
That's great. And I've got one more question for you. You deal with you provide solar plus storage to a lot of people around the state through A&R. Do you feel like A&R customers understand the value of energy resilience, and how do you put a value on that?
I think they do. I think, and for me personally, this is a really important point, is it's not like I'm trying to dissuade people from getting a battery, because, you know, if you think about it, solar is, if you've got grid tied solar, your battery is kind of the grid. You know, you could look at it like that. That's one of the things that's said often. But the people that are really going solar, they have specific reasons. Sometimes, you know, they live further out of town where they get frequent short outages. Well, they want to be able to bridge that gap, or they get long outages because, again, out of town at the end of the line, and they're out for 2 or 3 weeks. So it's people who have a history of those outages. That's one area. Second area is folks are just looking for general resilience. They think, you know, there are events happening whereby we don't, you know, we may be out of power for quite some time, and I would like to have some power for my home, for my family, even for their neighbors. We're seeing events, for example, the utilities are now starting on occasion, and in some areas, tell people, oh, there will be an outage if a certain event occurs, like a forest fire. That's already happened in Oregon, where Pacific Power is telling some of their customers, we're going to be turning power off in your area because there's a fire elsewhere. So people want that resiliency. And sometimes it can be health related too. We have folks who, well, I need this machine to stay alive, which we actually have somebody like that. And we have a bug out plan. That's great, but life's a whole lot easier if I can stay right here. So, that's another area.
That's great. Well, it's great, and it's great to see solar plus storage being installed in several of the homes on this tour. Really great to hear your story, and excited to come and say hi again on Saturday. Thanks so much, Mark, for being here.
Thank you.
All right, last but certainly not least, we are going to take a look at Argyle Gardens, which is a really unique site. It's beautiful, as you can see, and I'm gonna let the video here tell the story, and then I'm excited to ask some questions of Dave Audie, who was the principal architect on this project.
We are at Argyle Gardens, which is an innovative prototype for housing formerly homeless folks. My name is Dave Audie. I'm an architect with Holst in Portland, Oregon. A big part of what transition projects my client wanted to do was provide affordable homes for people. By having a reduction in the cost of their energy bills and utility bills, this allows people to have more accessibility to housing. And what we came up with was a prototype that we wound up naming LISA, meaning low-income single adult housing. Each building has 12 people living in it. Each floor has 6 people living in it. Those 6 people on each floor share 2 bathrooms and a kitchen, and they each have their own lockable private bedroom. So this co-housing idea is a really unique model that allows us to keep our rents down significantly. We have a higher R value than your standard wood frame building because we're being as efficient as we can with the lumber, and we're maximizing insulation. We're able to rely on ceiling fans instead of having to provide air conditioning. Obviously, we then have the PV array on the south facing parts of the roof. We have a 70 kilowatt system. We got incentives through Energy Trust. We also got a grant from the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. And between Energy Trust and Bonneville, we were able to cover almost the entire cost of the photovoltaic array. It's getting easier and easier to make solar happen on projects. If you haven't met Trisha or the folks over at Energy Trust, definitely give them a call, and they're very friendly and helpful. I want to make sure I give a shout out to Walsh Construction. So all of these buildings were built in a factory and were shipped in pieces and assembled by crane on the site. And Walsh's partnership has just been phenomenal. We had a very dedicated project architect on this job named Ben Ott, and I'm just so proud of the work that Ben was able to do. There's 2 great challenges that we have right now in our culture, and one is obviously climate change that is probably the biggest challenge of our time, and housing insecurity also is something that we're extremely challenged with in the Portland area. We got to know the folks at Transition Projects over the years and just really fell in love with their mission. We couldn't be more proud to be a partner with them.
All right, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such an interesting site, and I can see we've already got some questions rolling in. I want to ask you first, what is the vision for the project? What impact do you hope the design will have in the future? And how does that kind of play into how you designed the project?
Sure. Thanks, Zach. So sorry, I've got a cat going crazy. The vision behind the project was to come up with a kit of parts that could be used in a number of different types of sites and types of locations and contexts. So something that was flexible and could be scaled up or scaled down depending on what you wanted to try to achieve. So whether it was housing the formerly homeless, housing people, seasonal workers on the coast, dormitories for college students. It's really a very flexible system that can fit a wide variety of needs.
That's fantastic. And is that is the modular design you talked about with the partnership with Walsh Construction key to that? Is that?
Yeah, so the other partner that wasn't mentioned was Mods PDX, which is a fabricator in North Portland, and they built the boxes and Walsh put the boxes together. But coming up with a replicable model that can be plug and play and not change from project to project, so that you have consistency and predictability for both cost and for schedule is really important.
That's great. So we've got a few questions here, so we can dive into them. Someone asked, what are the rents? And that's also, oh, the next question is a little bit different, I think. So yeah, what are the rents?
Yeah, so there's two different sizes of units. The large building that if folks go on Saturday, they'll see it has studio apartments in it that are basically standalone, very small apartment units. I think they go between $600 and $700 a month. And then the SRO units, which is the co-living side of things, where you're really renting a bedroom and then you have a shared kitchen and shared bathrooms, those can get under $500 a month. So we are really driving those costs down as low as possible. And then most folks that are living there are getting rental assistance on top of that. So it's most of the folks are not paying any rent to live there.
That's great. Someone also asked, what are the costs? I believe this is construction costs per square foot.
Yeah, so really interesting dynamic through the design of the project was comparing cost per bed to cost per square foot. The cost per square foot is relatively high because we have a very dense living, lots of walls, lots of what we call pound cake versus angel cake. So a very heavy building. And so the cost per square foot, I believe, is around $320 a foot, but then the cost per bed is down around $120,000 per bed. And so comparing that to other studio apartment buildings, usually those costs can get up over $200,000 per bed. So we have a very reduced cost per bed, but a high cost per square foot.
That's great. And I want to, someone asked, what are the other energy efficiency features? And also, you mentioned to me that some of the benefit of modular design is in being able to have a very controlled environment where it's actually being constructed. And so like, what are the efficiency features and how did that kind of interface with the modular aspects?
Sure. So we were able to do really carefully controlled advanced framing to maximize the use of every piece of wood because it was built in a factory. That also allowed for maximized insulation. And then also because it's built in a controlled environment, we could have a really good air barrier at all of the terminations and transitions across the facade. So it's a very tight envelope, and that helps us control the amount of energy loss that it has. And then, we've got the standard things like low flow fixtures and Energy Star appliances. And so it is a relatively, LED lighting all throughout. So everything is kind of up to snuff for our base specifications that we use at Holst.
That's great. And you also mentioned to me something that I thought was really interesting. And that is trauma-informed design. And can you talk a little bit about what that is and why that's important in this context? You bet.
So, housing is more than just a place to live. It's also, it provides a foundation for your well-being as a human. And a lot of folks that are coming out of homelessness have experienced various forms of trauma. And so when we look at trauma-informed design, what we're trying to do is create spaces that are clear and have a lot of connection to nature. They're easy to work your way through. They're not confusing. Oftentimes we try to avoid jarring angles, jarring colors, and really try to work with biophilic design and connect it to nature as much as possible.
That's great. And kind of on that same line of question, also one of the benefits of building efficiently is that there are air quality benefits as well that come with that. And can you talk about why that is also important in this context?
Yeah, so I mean, multifamily housing has had notoriously bad air quality issues over the last few decades, and I think we're finally getting to the point where we understand that how important air quality is to our health. And so making sure that we've got really ample ventilation and getting lots of air changes throughout the units can, you know, help with airborne illness. It can help with respiratory issues. It can help with just your overall sense of well-being. And for too long, our apartments have been built without enough adequate fresh air, relying on things like trickle vents in the windows or just things coming under the undercuts of the doors. They're too easy for people to circumvent or not use properly. That we have really major air quality issues in a lot of multifamily housing in our region.
Great. And I think last question here from an attendee. With no AC, what are the temperatures in the studio / sleeping rooms? Is it
Yeah, so we do have ports for mobile ACs for folks that do need it, and so there is that backup. But we did make that choice, and it's an ongoing discussion. That decision was made, I don't know, maybe 2.5 years ago. It took forever to get this project funded, and so our world has changed in 2.5 years, and now all of a sudden, air conditioning is becoming much more of a necessity than a nice to have. So our projects that we're looking at now are starting to move away from portable AC solutions and much more into, you know, springing for mini splits, changing proformas so that we can actually get, you know, built-in air conditioning and not just have, you know, a P-tack in the wall that's a giant, you know, gaping hole in your wall and your envelope. So if I had to do it over again, I definitely would have included mini splits, but that also triples, quadruples, quintuples the cost of the HVAC for a unit. So it's something that has to be taken into consideration for funding. That being said, we have been doing some measurements even with the heat dome that happened this last summer. Those stairwells that are only conditioned for fresh air and for freeze protection, they stayed at 81 degrees at the hottest day when we were at 116. And so we felt pretty good that just by getting air movement through there that we were able to control the heat dome. So the polycarb panels really do work, especially when you ventilate the space properly.
That's really interesting. That's great. Well, this is such an interesting site. I'm so glad that you're with us today. And I am going to wrap things up now since we're right at times, hair past. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. And I just want to invite everybody again. I put the link in the chat. If you want to join us on Saturday, please do. It's going to be great. We're going to see all 4 of these sites in person, and it's really a different experience getting to be there and maybe have a longer conversation too. So thanks so much, everybody, and we will see you on Saturday.